Hello, today we're going to take a look into what Furina's best builds are. For those of you that haven't watched the first video I made on her, my conclusion about her kit was that she's quite nice in terms of personal damage output, so building her height is very important. Specifically, my first impression was that her damage output could be in the same ballpark as Yelan's, so very good for an off-field Hydro unit. This impression was based on my assumption that each of her turret would hit the opponent 7 times. However, it seems that her turret's hit frequency is a bit different than what I've assumed it to be initially. In fact, basically the lower damage turret will hit more times, while the higher damage turrets will hit fewer times than what I've assumed. Even with this change though, it seems her damage output doesn't change compared to the first calculation I made. The reason is that my assumption about her total hit count was right. What was wrong was just the frequency of each turret hit. Basically, the damage of each turret is balanced in a way that redistributing the hit count of each of them doesn't change the total damage. Let me remind you all that if you enjoy my content and my theory crafting, you can show your support by subscribing and leaving a thumbs up and also following me on Twitter. Now that we got the basics out of the way, let me talk about her artifacts. I will discuss the artifacts before the weapon, because her weapon selection hugely depends on which artifact stats you build and which artifact sets you choose. Focalors is an HP scaling unit, and as a rule of thumb, HP scaling units put more importance into HP stats than attack scaling units put into attack stats from artifacts. The reason is that there are many attack buffs in the game, like Bennett, Tenacity of Millelith, Noblesse, while HP scaling units don't have many buffers, so there is just more importance in building HP. This is even more true for Focalors, since she has many damage buffs in her kit from her abilities, and her best set buffs her damage bonus by a lot. By best set I mean the Golden Troop set, the only set in the game that buffs elemental skill damage, and of course for an elemental skill damage dealer such as Focalors, this is heaven. This set gives an extra 70% damage bonus to Focalors for her elemental skill, which gets added to the damage bonus she gets from her burst and the damage bonus she gets from her passive. Basically, even without Kazuha, she is a character that will be reaching something like 130% even without an Hydro Goblet. Before I talk about optimal stat distribution though, let's see the other options. The Vorukasha's Glow set, the set that was meant for Deia, is actually very good for Focalors as well. The reason is that it gives an HP percent bonus with the 2-piece effect, and the damage bonus that comes from the 4-piece effect that is dependent on HP loss is perfect for a character like Focalors that will be losing HP continuously through the elemental skill. Other options include combinations of 2-piece set bonuses like HP and Hydro damage bonus and Hydro damage bonus, HP and HP, energy recharge as well, since she's a unit that will need energy recharge investment, but you really can't go wrong with Golden Troop. It's definitely the set you should be farming, also because it's paired with Marashu C in its domain, which by itself is an excellent set for many Fontaine units and also non-Fontaine units, so this is just a very good domain. Regarding her stats specifically, something to consider for Furina is the energy requirements. We now have information about her particle generation, which allows her to predict how much energy she'll require. Just like any turret-based character, Furina's elemental skill particle generation is delayed, meaning she will cast her elemental skill and then it will generate particles throughout the rotation. The issue with this is obvious: she won't be on field when the particles get generated. So if things stay like this, her energy requirements are pretty high, higher than Yelan's actually. In case you put her on teams with 2 Hydro units and several Favonius procs, it's not so bad. But in situations where she's the only Hydro unit, things get pretty tragic. Luckily for her, putting 2 Hydro units on a team is for the most part advantageous, so odds are you won't have to invest too much energy into her. But in the scenario where she doesn't have a Hydro partner like Shincho, Nuilet, Yelan, you definitely have to manage in some way, in some drastic way. So on average for this guide, I'm going to assume she's going to need 210 energy recharge, which is the scenario where she has an Hydro partner and there is a Favonius weapon on team. This factor basically forces her to use an energy recharge Sans even in the scenario where she's using an energy recharge weapon, which is crazy. Meanwhile, for the goblet, there are actually two scenarios. The scenario where you don't use Kazuha, and the one where you use him and you add extra damage bonus on top of all the damage bonus Furina gets from her kit. For this second scenario, the HP goblet basically always beats the Hydra goblet, unless you have a weapon that heavily buffs HP like Key of Kajnishut. But for the most part, HP goblet is better with Kazuha. And this is pretty convenient considering how much easier it is to get a good HP goblet compared to a damage bonus goblet. For the circlet, critical rate or critical damage depending on the weapon is what you primarily should go for. However, even for the circlet, the HP piece is actually pretty close. So going for a full HP build is not so bad and pretty convenient again. Something you have to consider is that if you want Focalors to heal on occasions on your team, then HP just has much more value than usual. So overall HP stats are really good and also favor a part of her kit that the other stats don't favor at all basically. Having said all of this about her artifact builds, now let's see her weapons. I needed to talk about artifacts first because each weapon is going to have its specific artifact selection. So now that you have the context to understand my decisions, let's move forward with it. Of course, the best option is the signature weapon, which provides all the stats she needs. High crit damage in the secondary stat, and then several HP percent bonuses and elemental skill damage bonuses that come with some easily achievable conditions. However, it's not much better than all the other options, and actually a free-to-play weapon is one of her best possible choices. This weapon is Festering Desire, and it's actually pretty ridiculous because it's technically a free-to-play weapon, but you could only obtain this if you played the Albedo event back in 1.3. If you only started playing after that event ended, or you just skipped it for whatever reason, you're going to miss this incredible free-to-play option. Bravo Mihoyo, incredible decision making. The reason this weapon is so good is simple. It has a secondary stat that buffs energy recharge, which is useful, and a passive that is entirely dedicated to increasing the elemental skill damage through damage bonuses and crit rate bonuses. Since having a high attack stat is not a concern for Focalors specifically, it being a 4-star weapon, so it having a lower base attack stat, is not relevant here. The result is that it stacks up incredibly well to other 5-star options, and it's one of the best weapons you can have overall. Basically, Mihoyo is saying, cry me a river if you don't have this. Another good option is obviously the Key of Kajnishut, Nilu's signature weapon, which heavily buffs HP. It is good, but it just loses a bit of value if you use Kazuha on the team, since in that scenario the build without the Hydro Goblet becomes starkly better, so since the Key of Kajnishut needs to use a Hydro Goblet, it is penalized compared to other options. It also has an Elemental Mastery buffing effects for all allies, which is very useful for Vape teams, Dendro teams, but I'm not sure how easy it is going to be for Furina to activate it fully. The new Fontaine Gacha Sword is also pretty good at high refinement. It is the only 4-star weapon that has a secondary stat that buffs HP. The reason it is good is that its passive provides an energy refund for Furina, which scales up with refinements and is obviously very nice because she has such high energy requirements. Funnily enough, there is a free-to-play alternative to the free-to-play option Festering Desire, which is a weapon we got in Fontaine. This is pretty much Festering Desire but worse, so it's power creep in reverse. It provides energy recharge and some buffs for the elemental skill, but said buffs are just much smaller than what Festering Desire provides, so pretty weird, but we'll take it I guess. It's important to remember that since Furina is an off-field damage dealer and not a hyper carry, even though there are weapons that are much better than others, they're not particularly crucial for the team damage as a whole. For the most part, her team damage contribution is going to fluctuate between 20% and 30%, so even missing a great weapon is not a huge loss in the big picture. And that's it. If you have any questions, just ask below and I'll answer, and see you next time.